Jai Anilo Premadano Karma Kacho Gopi Jana Vallabha Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Krishna Namacharya Haridas Thakuriti, then Prabhupada Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Bhaktivedanta Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopina Shyam Radha Vrindavan Bhaktivedanta Mayapur Navadipnam Yamunamayi Ganga Devi ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Jyoti Devi ki, Samudaya Bhakta Devi ki. Sankirtan Yagnati. All glories to the Simple Devotees. All glories to the Simple Devotees. All glories to the Simple Devotees. Go Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, Text number 8. Tatra Jagmur Bhuvanam Punana Mahanubhava Munayaha Sashishyaha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padeshai Swayam Hi Tirthani Gunanti Santaha Tatro Pajagmur Bhuvanam Gunana Tatro Pajagmur Bhuvanam Gunana Mahanubhava Munaya Sashishyaha Mahanubhava Munaya Sashishyaha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padeshai Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padeshai Swayam Hitirthani Punanti Santaha Swayam Hitirthani Punanti Santaha Tatro Pajagmur Bhuvanam Punana Mahanubhava Munaya Sashishyaha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padeshai Svayam Hitirthani Punanti Santaha
Tatro Vajagmur Bhavanam Punana Anubhava Munaya Sashisha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padesha Ayam Tirthani Punati Santa Tatro Pajagmur Bhuvanam Punana Mahanubhava Munaya Sashisha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padesha Swayam Tirthani Punanti Santa Tatro Pajagmur Bhuvanam Punana Mahanubhava Munaya Sashisha Prayena Tirtha Bigama Padeshai
Mataji's. Tatra, there, Upajagmu, arrive, Bhuvanam, the universe, Punana, those who can sanctify, Maha Anubhava, great minds, Munaya, thinkers, Sashishya, along with their disciples, Prayena, almost, Tirtha, place of pilgrimage, Abhigama, journey, Apadeshari, on the plea of, Swayam, personally, he, certainly, Tirthani, all the places of pilgrimage, Punanti, sanctified, Santaha, sages. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At that time, all the great minds and thinkers, accompanied by their disciples, and sages who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey. Purport. When King Parikshit sat down on the bank of the Ganges, the news spread in all directions of the universe, and the great-minded sages, who could follow the importance of the occasion, all arrived there on the plea of pilgrimage. Actually, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit, and not to take a bath of pilgrimage, because all of them were confident enough to sanctify the places of pilgrimage. Common men go to pilgrimage sites to get themselves purified of all sins. Thus, the places of pilgrimage become overburdened with the sins of others. But when such sages visit overburdened places of pilgrimage, they sanctify the places by their presence. Therefore, the sages who came to meet Maharaj Parikshit were not very much interested in getting themselves purified like common men. But on the plea of taking bath in that place, they came to meet King Parikshit, because they could foresee that Srimad Bhagavatam would be spoken by Shukadeva Goswami. All of them wanted to take advantage of the great occasion. The background of this verse is that the great king, an emperor, we are told the emperor of the world. Nowadays it is hard to conceive of anyone being an emperor or a king or an administrative head of the whole world. Even the United Nations, which claims to represent a body a world body, has no real jurisdiction over any of its member nations. What to speak of the individual. But here, one person is said to be the emperor of the world. It is difficult for modern historians to accept this idea, although there are some famous persons who were able to extend their empires, like Alexander the Great could extend his empire to across many nations. But there's no modern historical record, apart from these statements of the Srimad Bhagavatam, to authenticate the claim that the emperors, like Maharaj Parikshit, were in fact controlling the whole world. That will be up to the ability of our devotee historians, scientists, etc., to be able to prove this to the satisfaction of mundaners. Because otherwise, when they hear this statement, they don't accept it. That someone is the emperor of the whole planet, they just don't accept that. So, some research will have to be done in a way which will convince them. In any case, this king was cursed. The emperor of the world was cursed. Now we see how when the President of the United States in the 1960s, John Kennedy, came to Dallas, he was assassinated. And that was certainly a very disturbing incident for the whole world. Now, on the same hand, we have a person who's the administrative head of the whole world. He's cursed to die. So we can understand what a tremendous calamity this must have been. And it says here that news spread throughout the universe. The king, the emperor, did not react in a way in which we would ordinarily believe someone should react if they got notice of death. But supposing you got notice of death, what would you do? No doubt you would make sure that you have your insurance policy intact. You would inform all of your beloved relatives or friends. You would probably grieve and make every effort imaginable to escape death. That's what most people do. They try everything. Hospitals make most of their money on death, either death or the avoidance of death, because people will spend practically any amount of money if they can manage to save their life. Because nowadays, most people think that when the body dies, everything's over. So, you should not spare anything to save someone from dying, because once they're dead, it's all over. Well, that's not how Maharaj Parikshit reacted. When he got notice, first of all, he was grieving. But what was he grieving about? He was grieving for fault that he had committed. The reason why he was cursed is that he had offended a sage who was in meditation. Of course, we understand that it was the will of the Lord that such a thing took place, because normally Maharaj Parikshit was fully in control of his senses. He was a completely self-controlled person. The fact that he became very thirsty while out hunting, and when he went to the hermitage of a sage, he lost control of himself, and wanting to get some water and being neglected, he became upset and put a dead snake, just like this flower garland is around my neck. He circled the sage's neck with a dead snake, as if to say, this is your fault for neglecting me. It was an offense. And as a result, that sage's son took revenge and cursed the emperor to die. So they were very powerful. Even this, the sage was, not only the sage was powerful, but his unqualified son was still qualified enough to be able to say a curse which would kill someone. Can you imagine today what havoc would be done if anyone had such powers? Can you imagine what would happen? It's hard to imagine. Even if a Brahmin had such a power, he might easily be allured into threatening to use his power and extorting money from people. Because people have become so greedy in this age. And in fact, the Brahmin community has fallen down in this age. That fall down was precipitated by this curse of the unqualified son of the sage. So people do not have such power of cursing. Nevertheless, the Lord himself will not forgive an offense committed at the lotus feet of a devotee. So we have to be very, very cautious in this regard, not to offend the pure devotees of the Lord. The news of the sage's decision, what was his decision? He decided that since I'm going to die, and he had the power to counteract the curse, but he said, I'm not going to counteract it because this has all happened as a result of the will of the Lord. And I'm not going to counteract this curse. So what should I do? He said, I will sit down beside the Ganges River, and I will fast. I will not take anything, not even drinking water. And I will not sleep until I hear the narrations of the Lord. He decided that he wanted to hear the glories of the Lord recited. Because it is said that when one dies, whatever one's consciousness is at the moment of death, that will determine one's next birth. So he thought that I should now fix my mind on the Supreme Lord and his incomparable pastimes, activities. And the news of his decision spread throughout the universe. Again, we may find that hard to imagine. How could, even if you don't accept, we say that the Srimad Bhagavatam, this incident was about 5,000 years ago. Well, how did any news spread throughout the universe 5,000 years ago? No telephones, no telegrams, no internet, no airplanes. How did it happen? Well, again, we have to trust the statements of the Bhagavatam, that these persons here, were very powerful. Even people, psychics, they say, and who can have this ability of mental telepathy. They can telepathically communicate. Psychic is able supposedly to telepathically communicate. Well, these sages and saints from different parts of the universe were far more powerful than any, Western psychics or whatever. And they could understand what was going on. They were communicating. It is said that the Lord is situated within the heart of each living entity. So if someone can communicate with another person, it is by the grace of the Lord. There is, a common, everybody is connected. And that connection is with the Supreme Lord, the Supersoul. The Supersoul Lord is the connection. Everyone is plugged in. Maybe some people don't turn on their, receivers, or they don't, turn on their receiver and find out what is being broadcast. But everybody has a connection. Now, some people make use of it and some don't. So when one turns on that connection, then he takes dictation from the Lord within the heart. And we should understand from this statement that this is what happened. That Krishna, who is within the heart of all living entities, made it known to these saintly persons scattered throughout the universe that on the earth planet, besides the bank of the Ganges, in the area of Mathura, whatever, nearby, this great king was now going to hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. And they decided to come. It is said here that these sages were very powerful, so much so that they could purify a place of pilgrimage. Normally we go to places of pilgrimage to get purified. And one of the things which purifies us is water, not ordinary water, because most places of pilgrimage are situated by sacred rivers. And, for example, the river Ganges has become pure from touching the lotus feet of the Lord. When Vamanadev was taking his 3 steps of land, he kicked a hole in the universal covering through which the Ganga poured, and it touched the lotus feet of the Lord. And so many ways in which the Lord bathed in the Ganges. So the Ganges is a pure river. When the Ganges was going to be brought here onto this planet, the Ganges was very skeptical. She said, I don't know if I want to come on this planet, because if I come here, so many sinful people will want to dump their sins on my waters. So I'm not sure I want to come to this planet, Earth. There's a long narration about this in the Bhagavatam, that there was a reason why the Ganges had to be brought here. That is another pastime. But in any case, she said that I don't know if I want to come onto this planet. But she finally agreed to come on this basis that since the Lord had touched her waters, great saintly persons would also take their bath in the Ganges. And by taking their bath in the Ganges, they would accept the sins that had been deposited by the Ganges. They would purify the Ganges. So if we want to know what is the power of the holy places, the power of the holy places is that holy people are constantly visiting. And when holy people go to a place of pilgrimage, what do? They discuss the narrations of the Lord. Therefore, the most cleansing activity you can perform when you go to a place of pilgrimage is to hear saintly persons discoursing about the glories of the Lord. That is more advantageous, more beneficial, more purifying, even than bathing in the sacred rivers. Prabhupada's own example is there, that when he went on pilgrimage to see his spiritual master in Braj, then at the time there was a large pilgrimage party, and they went out to see the holy places, and they asked Prabhupada, do you want to come? At that time, Prabhupada said, no, I will stay here. And he stayed with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati along with so many sannyasis who also stayed behind to hear Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur speak. And the other people went to visit the holy places. But Prabhupada's idea was that wherever Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is, that place is a place of pilgrimage, better than any other place. And as a result of this, when Prabhupada's initiation time came, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, he marked me, Prabhupada said, and he said, I remember this young man, he likes to hear. He hears very nicely. In other words, his Guru Maharaj noted this quality of Prabhupada, that he was not as interested to visit holy places as to hear from a saintly person. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur considered this far more valuable. And he accepted Prabhupada. He saw this boy is intelligent. This young man is intelligent. Well, boy, young man is intelligent. But Prabhupada was about, say, 36 or so. So, hearing is so important. Hearing, not just any kind of hearing, because most people hear. Now people will hear about the Super Bowl. Everybody, is talking about who will win the Super Bowl. That's the kind of hearing that goes on. Hearing of frivolous activities, hearing of whatever, temporary worldly affairs. But this type of hearing is different. This is the kind of nectar which is immortal. You hear this, and the stream of nectar which flows into your ears transforms your heart. This type of hearing goes to the heart, and it purifies the heart. Shrinvatam Sukata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana. This creates punya. It creates a type of transcendental piety, which is a means of getting out of the material world. Otherwise, when you hear ordinary topics, your consciousness becomes contaminated. Far from purifying your consciousness, when you hear ordinary topics, what is the result? You become more and more covered over. Your eternal God consciousness, Krishna consciousness, your consciousness, the Krishna consciousness, which is lying within in a dormant condition, becomes more and more dormant. But when you hear the narrations of Krishna, it removes the covering. Chaito Darpana Madhana, it clears the covering of the heart. It cleanses it of all material contamination. And what is the result? Your natural Krishna consciousness awakens. It's already there, but it becomes what wakes up. It is not that when we are teaching Krishna consciousness, we are teaching something new. No. When you go out and Sankirtan and you preach and distribute books, what are you doing? You're awakening. You are creating a situation which is at least nudging the person. Wake up. When we pray for going out and Sankirtan, and what is our prayer? We pray to the Supreme Lord to please guide me, and please guide some sincere souls so that they can come in contact with these transcendental literatures and begin their spiritual life again. It's there, dormant. We have that confidence when we go out and Sankirtan that each and every living entity, every single person that we meet is a spirit soul, part and parcel of God, and that they have a relationship with God potentially. It is lying there dormant. And when we engage them in book distribution, we are beginning to allow them to again reconnect with God. And it is good for them. So, this hearing is so important. And Maharaj Parikshit decided, this is what I will do. I will hear. And the sages who could purify a place of pilgrimage, they also wanted to hear. In other words, it is stated that the topics of the Lord are so nice that even liberated souls want to hear. This is a very important verse which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is discussed with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, which we find in the Atmarama verse. Atmaramas Jamunayo. Nirgrantha pi Gurukrama. This unties the knot of the heart. It is such a valuable thing that even liberated souls take pleasure in hearing the topics of the Lord. If someone says, which is higher, bhakti or mukti, which is higher, devotional service to God or liberation, the proof is the Atmarama verse. Because the Atmarama verse is describing persons who are already liberated. Persons who are already liberated, they take pleasure in hearing the pastimes of the Lord. That means the pastimes of the Lord must be higher than liberation. Not that we hear the pastimes of the Lord in order to become liberated. It is liberated activity. Therefore, it is said that anyone who hears and chants the holy names of the Lord has already performed pilgrimage, tapasya, austerity, given in charity, studied the Vedas. Because this activity is considered so exalted, chanting of the holy names of the Lord, chanting the Srimad Bhagavatam verses, Bhagavad Gita verses, these activities are considered topmost activities for liberated souls. So we should not minimize the importance of this activity. As we can see, that King Parikshit considered this, and this is very important, the most important activity. How do we know it's the most important? Because the most important moment is the time of death. So his question was, what does one do? You know, what is the most essential activity to do? What does one do at the moment of death? Because that's the most important moment. Sometimes we say that the moment of the whole of life, our entire life is but a preparation for that one final moment. Imagine that. All of your activities that you're performing, you know, you're raising a family or going on Sankirtan as a brahmachari, whatever it may be. All of the combination of all your activities accumulated together is a preparation for that one moment. Because it is at that final moment of your life which everything will be accounted for and which will determine your next birth. All of the activities, all of your thoughts are going to be balanced and then considered, and your next birth decided. So we have to prepare for that moment. And what is the best activity? To hear, regularly, to hear. And as Parikshit Maharaj said, I will hear Krishna's pastimes. Therefore, this hearing of the pastimes of the Lord is topmost of all. This is Prabhupada's life mission. What is his life mission? To establish ISKCON and practically to translate Bhagavatam. These two activities. The Bhagavatam translation is considered most essential activity of all. Most essential activity of all. So if we don't regularly come for Bhagavatam recitation, that we are neglecting the most important activity. That's why Prabhupada said, if you see the list of things which he wrote on, he said, one must attend morning and evening class. And morning class meant Srimad Bhagavatam recitation. One of the 5 most important activities in devotional life. Why? Because these 5 activities are very conducive to developing love of God, Bhava Bhakti. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Not just any kind of hearing of the Bhagavatam, hearing from the devotee of the Lord, speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam. That will infuse me with the desire to advance in spiritual life. So many persons came together for associating, and not hearing alone, not just reading alone, but reading in association, hearing in association with the devotees. That has more effect, more potency, if you all come together and hear together the glories of the Lord. Why? Because then questions may come, solutions to the questions may come, practical application. How can we apply the teachings of the Bhagavatam in our daily life? It's very, we have to consider, how will it be possible to preserve our traditions of Krishna consciousness in the face of an ever-changing world? This is the dilemma which faces every religion today. How can we preserve our traditions in the light of increasing, scientific advancements and rampant materialism? So we have to think very carefully. How will we be able to do that? We have to have solutions. Prabhupada said he wanted a book written, how to solve the problems of the world. He wasn't satisfied simply to say, we'll ignore the problems of the world. We'll just, be in our own little bubble of Krishna consciousness and ignore the problems of the world. You have to be able to solve the problems of the world. If people say, what is your solution for poverty? What is your solution for, families breaking up, divorce, social disorganization, societies becoming broken? What is your solution? Crime, what is your solution? Disease, what is your solution? And you have to be able to find a solution based on the formulas of Krishna consciousness. That's preaching. And that is Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, just trying to live in your own little bubble. Oh, I don't care about those problems. They don't affect me. They do. You can't say they don't affect us. We are affected in so many ways. So this is meant for thoughtful persons. Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Consciousness is meant for thoughtful persons. Not stereotypical, treatments of problems. Well, if everybody would just chant Hare Krishna, problems will go away. That is all right, that's true. But you have to prove how that is true. How will the problems be solved? So, Krishna Consciousness has solutions, but we have still not seen this book published. No one has yet published. No one has written this book. Either that means that they're still trying to figure out the answers. And Prabhupada had solutions. When he met that police lieutenant in Chicago, and he was seeing in the newspapers they were talking about crime, what to do. And Prabhupada said, I'll tell you what to do. You give me a building. Give me one building. Let the city give me one building. And I will invite, so many delinquent youth there. And I'll train them in our process of Krishna consciousness. And I'll solve the problem of crime, at least for all those who submit to the training. So, that is not being done. There are prisons now, but what do the prisons do? They simply hold the prisoners. Make them more disturbed than they were to begin with. They don't change the heart, purify the heart of the prisoner. Instead, they spend $30,000 on each prisoner now. $30,000. You realize what that is? It's more money is spent on a person who breaks the law than people spend on the law abiders. And that's how topsy-turvy everything has become. We spend more money, an average person doesn't make the average income in the United States is not $30,000. But the average income of every single prisoner is $30,000. So think about that. You can make more money going to jail than you can by staying out of jail. And many prisoners know that. That's why they think you can't lose. Commit a crime, either you get away with it, or you get to enjoy life in jail for $30,000 a year. Maybe you don't have the money in the pocket, but that's what they're spending on you. So, this is complete foolishness. This means bankruptcy. Any government that's going to do this is going to go bankrupt. You can spend, first of all, the number of criminals is increasing, and the cost of maintaining them is increasing. That means the government has to go bankrupt. Unless they can solve the problem of what makes someone a criminal. Now, of course, not everyone, most criminals will be willing to subject themselves to the training of Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada's point was some will agree, and we'll take them and transform them. But no help came. No building came. Prabhupada was looking at a nice building in Chicago, remember that? And when he did it, instead they used it for some political, use. So, this activity of sitting there may appear to be irresponsible on Maharaj Krishna's part. When he got news of his death, why didn't he settle down his family affairs, etc., etc., etc.? Well, when you get news of death, if you're going to die in 7 days, you have to fix your conduct. He showed that what is the most important activity of all? So that we would all understand that even at a time when you would think of so many other things, you better think of Krishna. So that is certainly a strong message. That on a day-to-day basis, don't keep putting Krishna consciousness aside saying, I have to take care of this, I have to take care of this, I have to take care of this. Here's Maharaj Krishna, who gets notice of death, and he thinks, I only have to take care of one thing. I have to remember Krishna. So that you have to do first of all. The first priority, first order of business is be Krishna conscious. From that point, do everything else. Don't do everything else, and then whatever's left over in time, I'll be Krishna conscious. First priority, be Krishna conscious. Then from there, start to take on other responsibilities. We'll stop here and ask if anyone has any questions. Yes, good, brother.
Just a quick one. In Russia, they've been doing prison programs, and are very successful. And the regional warden of Malaria got on television and commented that these Krishnas are doing a wonderful service, and the government should do whatever they can to support them because they're transforming the prisoners, the hardest prisoners, and the best prisoners. And they're chanting systems and they're filling the prisoners. And the prisoners were wearing necklaces. And they says that the game
Probably became more pious than the wardens.
Krishna's, in Chaitanya we see Krishna's Kaviraj explain that Krishna consciousness won't be understood by non-devotees. And then on the other hand, we're approaching non-devotees, like you suggested, that there should be some work in history and so forth to convince them of our philosophy.
We don't ask them to do it. We're going to do it. Non-devotees are going to break such things.
No, I'm not asking. My question is that will such endeavor, will it actually reach people?
They will reach the people who are reasonable. I mean, what can we do? We should present things in a reasonable manner. But if we don't present anything, they're not going to expect. I mean, this is not fair. Because you're not a devotee, I know you'll never accept anything, therefore I won't make any effort to preach to you. But we will make every effort, and then if you refuse, what can we do? We made the effort. Otherwise, it's not fair. We don't even give them a chance. Because then you'll say, well, you've never shown me anything reasonable. Show me some reasonable proof. Just like nowadays, 100 to 100 years ago or less, most people who were God believing. Now, most people don't believe in God. Most educated people don't believe in God. Because they feel that they've had more proof from materialism than they've gotten from religion. So they give up believing in God. So unless you can appeal to reason, they won't become convinced. At least, even if you can make an appeal to reason, some will still not be convinced, but some may. And at least then we have done so. Now, it is stated in Chaitanya Chaitamrita, apply your reason, that these teachings are wonderful. But Prabhupada wants us to, he said that you should present these in your own words, in your own language. It means not just, in terms of grammar, but it means in terms of logic and reason and science, etc. That's what he asked the scientists. Prove scientifically that life comes from life. Don't just state it theologically. We state it theologically, the scientists say, so what? That's your religious faith. Prabhupada said, no, it's not faith, it's fact. And then he asked the PI people, prove that it's fact. He asked our devotee scientists, prove to them that it's fact, that life comes from life.
The sages took advantage of the opportunity to see and to hear the Bhagavatam spoken. So how eager should we be to take advantage of the province and ready for 95.Dallas holy places so we can get purified?
You should be as eager as your pocketbook allows you. You can go every year, very good. You can go twice a year, still better.
Sri, last week you had mentioned the part of faith, and how it plays in your life. And I was wondering if this will of the Lord happened Maharaj Parishad had to do with faith or less? I don't really understand the concept.
No. Maharaj Parishad's curse does not have anything to do with faith. Faith, F-A-T-E, it does not. It has to do with the arrangement of Krishna. He's a pure devotee. He is not under the laws of material nature. Faith, in that sense, works on the basis of material laws. Devi Prakriti. And it is said that one gets another body by the arrangement of the demigods. And faith is based on, your karmic actions, your karma in terms of its consequences. But this is nothing like that. This person is directly a pure devotee under the control of Krishna, who is faith personified. As it's said, when you clap your hands and you're a devotee, all the lines on the palms of your hands change. The faith, the karma changes. This person is directly coming from the spiritual world. Maharaj Parishad, he's not an ordinary soul who's transmigrating through repeated birth and death. He's an eternal associate of Krishna. He's not a sadhaka. So everything that happens to such a pure devotee is Krishna. It's Leela.
So we're talking about the need for a book about spiritual solutions to material problems. Krishna Maharaj produced a book called Divine Nature that focuses on mind, but it is said that examples are important precepts. Isn't it more important that we show by example, practically demonstrate how Krishna consciousness is?
Yeah, that's very good.
And not just producing a book. Because that Divine Nature book has been produced, and it's a very wonderful book, but practically this one doesn't mean anybody's home.
Well, surely that's true. Precepts, actions are more important than words. Teach by your actions. Both are necessary. We should teach by our words and by our
I think Krishna Maharaj is one of his purposes in writing a book was to encourage devotees to change their lives.
first have to read the book. So precepts are important. Otherwise, the people won't change their actions.
You're bringing out another book because about spiritual solutions. You're very kind of book. It's called Spirit Matters.
Spirit matters.
Yes, they're working on it.
That's a nice title. Yes.
I was just wondering about the material energy that influences people to be less pious, and trying to understand it because it also comes from Krishna. How can I further understand its role or its
Yeah.
importance?
This question, I was listening to a tape, and a girl asked Prabhupada something like that. Well, her question was that if Krishna is God, he's all spiritual, how is it possible that the material energy, why does he have material energy? So Prabhupada answered that because you pass stool and urine, does it mean that you're dead? And he talked on and on this example. He said, stool and urine is coming from you, but does that mean that you're only stool and urine? Or does it mean that you're dead? The fact that you pass stool and urine. He said, you have so many nice qualities, and you are who you are, but stool and urine also comes from you. He gave a very common example. So, Prabhupada said it's only an approximation, but we should understand that God is the source of everything. Everything which is spiritual and everything which is material. And the material energy actually is really originally spiritual also. but it is transformed in order to accommodate our material desires. Otherwise, there is no need for the material energy. It is like a prison. A prison is only necessary because there are criminals. If there were no criminals, there would be no need of prisons. This material energy, this material world, is like a huge prison house for all of us, because we're prisoners, we're criminals. If we cease to be criminals, then there will be no need for material energy. We can be wound up. But there's no fear of that happening. Therefore, it is said that the material energy is eternal. It means it is not eternal in its shape, but it will always be there. Because there will always be criminals, there will always be lawbreakers. There will always be persons who defy God and who need a place to live in defiance of God. This material world is a concession, an accommodation by the Lord for those of his children, his offspring, who refuse to acknowledge him, refuse to live by his laws. So this whole creation is set up just for them to have a place to live. Because God is a merciful Father, He doesn't neglect anyone. Even His disobedient children are given accommodation. Now, if material energy is originally spiritual, if its original nature is spiritual, but it acts as matter because of our material desires, if we change our material desires, then the material energy will become transformed into spirit. Example, this microphone. It's a material object, but is it being used for material purpose? No. So in one sense, it's become spiritualized. The floor, this temple room floor, is sacred now. It was ordinary wood. These tiles were available. You could buy them in any, hardware or whatever the place where they sell these shops are, in whatever shops that they sell these tiles. But they're not same anymore, because they've become a floor in which kirtan devotees are performing chanting, etc. So we can transform the world into its original spiritual quality by using everything in Krishna's service. Just like this body. Your body is a material body, but when you use it in Krishna's service, it gradually becomes spiritual. Therefore, there's a verse that a pure devotee's body is spiritual and pure like the Ganges River. Although it may seem that a pure devotee's body is subject to old age, to disease, it has imperfections of birth, the Ganges River also is apparently sometimes not pure. What does that mean? It's got foam in it. It has dirty things floating in it. But that doesn't affect the Ganges River from purifying anyone who bathes in her waters. We see that even when the Ganges is sometimes in places like Calcutta, which are, very heavy materialistic cities, where so much waste is being dumped into the Ganges, people still bathe in the Ganges. And even dirty things are floating in the Ganges, they just push it away, dip in the waters, and feel purified. In the same way, a pure devotee's body, even though it may appear to have so many imperfections, it's totally acting in the service of Krishna. Therefore, it's spiritualized. The example is given: a piece of iron, an ordinary piece of iron, when you put it in fire, if the fire is hot enough, the iron will become red hot. And it will begin to take on the qualities, not of iron, but fire. It will burn, it gives off heat, light. In the same way, when your body is engaged in the service of spirit, when matter is engaged in the service of spirit, matter will act like spirit. It will lose its material qualities. So if we can make our entire life devoted in the service of spirit, of Krishna, then our whole life becomes spiritualized. Whatever that may include, family affairs, working, doesn't matter what it is. So a pure devotee is always living in Krishna consciousness, wherever he or she may be at any time. That takes advancement to do that. We have to practice. First of all, we have to remember Krishna. We have to become Krishna conscious. Otherwise, our desires are going to constantly undermine us. As long as you have material desires in the heart, your thoughts, your consciousness will be polluted. And you can't devote yourself in Krishna's service. So we have to first of all clear ourselves of all material thoughts. Therefore the chanting of Hare Krishna is so important. Taking prasadam is so important. Associating with the devotees is so important. Does that answer?
Yes.
Any other questions? Mataji's? All right. We'll stop here then. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, or Bhaktivedanta ki jai, or Prabhupada ki jai.